You know, sometimes it ain't the big things that bring the past back. Sometimes it's something as small as the sound of a train whistle far off, round dusk, or the way cinnamon mixes in the air when you open the oven door. Just the other day, I was baking my peach cobbler, Lord have mercy, the one with the sugar crust that your granddaddy used to sneak pieces from, and right when that steam hit my face, I don't know what got into me, but my knees near buckled. 'Cause just like that, I was 19 again. Barefoot in Millie Jo's backyard, Logan so hard I nearly choked on sweet tea. The smell of cut grass, fireflies blinking, and my heart beating like a drum because we had the wildest idea in our heads and no one to stop us. You ever have a memory grab you by the collar and pull you right back into it? Not just the picture of it, but the feel of it, the sweat on your neck, the dust in your shoes, the exact way the world smelled that night. Well, this is one of those memories for me. And I'll tell you what, it's been knocking around in my chest for over 60 years now. I never told nobody this story. Not my husband, not even my children. But these past few weeks, I've been seeing young folks rushing round, searching for love like it's something you can download or swipe on, and I just thought, maybe it's time y'all heard about the time we ran away. With no ticket, no plan, just a busted suitcase, a 25-cent comb, and a whole lot of dreamin'. It was the summer of 1964, hot as sin, humid as a preacher's breath. I was working at JCPenney's back then, selling church hats and summer dresses to ladies with too much perfume and not enough patience. My mama said I was lucky to have a job, but deep down, I didn't want to just stand behind a counter, smiling at strangers and praying the fan wouldn't quit again. No, sir. I wanted more. Adventure. A story. Something. And so did Millie Jo, my best friend since forever. She had hair like honey and fire, and a laugh that could wake the dead. We used to dream of New Orleans like it was some kind of magic kingdom. Jazz, lights, people who didn't know our names. A place where we could be someone new. Someone free. Now, I ain't proud of it, but we didn't have a lick of money. Didn't have a pot to pee in, as my daddy would say. But that didn't stop us. One night, sitting under the old pecan tree, Millie said, "Lila Jean, if we don't do something wild now, we'll blink and be married off to some farmer with no teeth." And I laughed so hard I cried, but she was right. We were standing on the edge of a life that was already being carved out for us. So the next morning, we packed one suitcase between us, mostly dresses and a broken radio, and we walked ourselves down to that dusty old train station. No plan, no ticket, just hope in our pockets and mischief in our eyes. You see, back in those days, you didn't just do something like that. Girls didn't run off to cities with saxophones in the streets and strangers on every corner. But we did. And what we found on that train, Lord have mercy. What we found, well, that's the part one ain't never told. So, if you're sitting there, wondering what an old gal like me's got to say worth hearing, lean in close now. Because this ain't just a story about two girls sneaking a ride. It's a story about love, not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that grabs your soul for just a little while and never lets go. And before we get too deep, let me ask you something. Have you ever done something so foolish, so risky, that it changed your whole life? 'Cause baby, if you haven't, maybe it's time you did. Back in my day, and I say that with a chuckle, 'cause Lord knows how many times I heard my own mama say it, the world moved a whole lot slower. I was born in a little Texas town you've probably never heard of, where the roads turned to dirt just past the church, and everybody waved whether they liked you or not. The days felt longer back then, especially in summer. We didn't have air conditioning, so most afternoons, you'd find me and Millie Jo sitting on the porch, fanning ourselves with church bulletins and dipping our feet in a wash tub filled with hose water. And I tell you what, those were some of the finest hours I ever lived. though I didn't know it at the time. I grew up in a white clapboard house with squeaky floors and a screen door that slammed loud enough to wake the neighborhood. Daddy worked down at the grain mill, came home with dust in his hair and tired eyes, but he always had a song hummin' in his throat. Mama was the kind of woman who never sat still, always bakin, scrub in, or mend in someone's dress. She smelled like lemon soap and cornbread and had a soft spot for anyone down on their luck. I guess that's where I got my heart from, always feelin' for folks, wantin' to help. We didn't have much, but we made do with what we had. Our dresses were hand-me-downs, and Christmas meant oranges in our stockings and a new ribbon for our hair. But I'll tell you what, we laughed. We laughed so hard. Sometimes I thought my sides would split. Me and Millie Jo used to lay out on the grass at night, staring up at the sky, talking about where we'd go someday. New Orleans, she'd say, or maybe California, where they got movie stars and oranges grow on trees. I'd nod, dreamin' right along with her, even though part of me figured I'd end up just like Mama, married young, raising babies, and prayin' for rain. But deep down, there was always a little itch, a whisper, like maybe, just maybe, the world was bigger than our town, bigger than the J.C. Penney's where I stood 6 days a week, watching the same folks buyin' the same things. I remember watching the train roll through on Saturdays, carrying strangers to places I couldn't even pronounce. I'd feel it rumble in my ribs, and it always left me wondering what would it feel like to just go? No plan, no skin permission. Just get on and ride till the world looked different. At 19, I still had freckles on my nose and more dreams than dollars. I believed, truly, that kindness was the most important thing, that if you were good, life would be good back to you, and that folks always came back around, one way or another. I hadn't yet learned that sometimes they don't. Sometimes the goodbye's real. But back then, my heart hadn't been bruised yet. It was wide open and hungry for something big. Millie Jo was my shadow and my spark, always up to something, always pulling me out of my shell. She wore bright lipstick even when no one would see it, just for the feel of it. She said we were gonna be someone someday. I didn't know what that meant, but I liked the way it sounded. Every dream I had back then had her Logan somewhere beside me, hair blowing in the wind, saying, "Come on, Lila Jean, don't be scared now." That's the world I came from. A world of Sunday potlucks, radio gospel, and slow dancing on the back porch when nobody was looking. A world where girls like me were supposed to be quiet, polite, and satisfied with what we were given. But I wasn't, and neither was she. And I reckon that's where the story really begins. I remember the heat that day like it was stitched into my bones. July in Texas don't play nice. The kind of heavy air that makes your dress stick to the back of your knees and your thoughts move slow. Me and Millie Jo had snuck down to the train yard with peanut butter sandwiches and enough boldness to make angels blush. We weren't doing anything wild, not yet. Just sitting on the edge of the old loading dock, swinging our legs and talking big dreams like always. But something was different that afternoon. The sky was quieter. Even the cicadas seemed to hush. And then I heard it soft and low, a sound I didn't recognize at first, like the wind was carrying a secret melody straight to my ears. It was a harmonica. Not loud, not polished, just honest. A little off-key, like someone was learning their way around the notes. And when I turned my head, there he was, standing at the far end of the yard, leaning up against a stack of crates like he'd always belonged there. Tall, but not proud, hair fallen into his eyes. He looked like he'd been on the road too long, dusty boots, sunburned cheeks, and hands that had seen real work. And that harmonica, Lord have mercy, the way he played it, slow and sad, like he was trying to remember something he'd lost. I didn't know his name then, just that he wasn't from our town. IDV remembered a face like that. He caught me staring, and I swear to you, child, he smiled just a little, not full on, just with his eyes, and kept playing. And I don't know why, but my heart thumped so loud I thought Millie could hear it. I didn't say a word, just tucked my sandwich back in the wax paper and kept staring like a fool. Later that evening, we were still loitering by the boxcars, pretending like we belonged, when the shift bell rang and the workers started rolling out. And there he was again, this time up close. Millie, bless her bold little heart, walked straight up to him and said, "You always make music for girls you don't know?" He looked her square in the eye and said, "Only the ones who look like they need a song." That was the first time I heard his voice. It was slow and gravelly, like sweet tea over ice. Said his name was Thomas Delroy, 22, working freight for the summer, trying to get to Chicago for school come fall. And just like that, we were talking, the three of us, me, Millie, and Thomas, with the eyes of an old soul and a laugh that came from deep in his belly. He asked us what we were doing, hanging around the yard, and Millie said, without missing a beat, waiting on a miracle. And wouldn't you know it, he didn't laugh. He just nodded, like he understood. I don't know how long we stood there. Time felt different with him. Slower, sweeter. And when the sun dipped low and the station lights flickered on, he pulled out 2 sandwiches from his satchel and handed them to us like it was the most natural thing in the world. No judgment, no questions, just kindness. That night, under the stars, he played us one more tune, something soft and blue, with no name. And when he finished, he looked at me, not Millie, not the sky, me, and said, "You ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Just that same wild thumping in my chest, like my heart was trying to climb its way out. I didn't have words for what I was feeling, but I knew something had just shifted. I didn't know then what he'd mean to me. Didn't know I'd carry his face with me for decades. But I remember standing there, watching him tuck that harmonica into his pocket and thinking, this ain't just some boy with a tune. This is the start of something, Doc. You know, people always talk about falling in love like it's a song, like violins start playing and the sky turns pink. But they don't talk much about the fear, the ache in your stomach when you realize the ground beneath you's starting to shift. That week, that one wild week, it felt like the world was finally cracking open, and for the first time in my life, I had a taste of something real. Me and Millie started meeting Thomas after his shift. Not every night, Lord knows we couldn't let Mama catch wind of it, but just enough to feel like we belonged to some secret story. And for a minute we did. But dreams got edges, and sometimes they cut. One evening I came home late, trying not to wake the screen door, and there was Mama, sitting in the dark with her apron still on and that look in her eyes, the one that made me feel 10 years old again. She didn't raise her voice, didn't have to. She just said, "You think I don't know where you been?" I opened my mouth, but my throat was dry as cornmeal. And then she said the words that stuck with me longer than I care to admit. "You ain't running from this life, Lila Jean. You're just running from yourself." I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, fists clenched round my sheet like a lifeline. I wanted to scream, to argue, to tell her she didn't know me. But maybe, part of me knew she wasn't all wrong. See, back then, we didn't talk about dreams. We talked about duty. You were supposed to finish school, marry decent, and thank the Lord for every little blessing, even if it came wrapped in boredom. And here I was, thinking of jazz bars and train whistles, thinking of a boy I barely knew with a crooked smile and soft hands that made me forget who I was supposed to be. The next day, I couldn't meet Millie's eyes. We were supposed to be leaving in 2 days, jumping that freight to New Orleans and starting fresh. But my stomach was twisting like a wash rag. And then came the letter. Thomas gave it to me folded in half, like it might burn if I held it too long. From Chicago, he said. My brother found work for me up there. If I go now, I can make it. And he looked at me, not hopeful, not sad, just waiting. I didn't even read the paper. I just nodded, like I understood. That night, I cried in the pantry, sat on a sack of flour with my skirt bunched up and cried till my ribs hurt. Not because he was leaving, not just that, but because I realized I was still so afraid. Afraid to go, afraid to stay, afraid of what I'd become if I didn't at least try. Millie? She wasn't scared. She said, to heck with your mama, and to heck with fear. We're going, Lila. This town's gonna shrink us to dust if we let it. And for a minute, I envied her. She had fire. I had questions. What kind of girl hides love in a flower bin? What kind of dream needs this much convincing? That was the moment I knew this wasn't gonna be no sweet love story. Not the kind with tidy endings and goodbyes on front porches. This was messier. Harder. I was 19 and already the world was a skin more of me than I knew how to give. I didn't know it yet, but the choice was coming. Thomas. Mama. Millie. Me. And it wouldn't be clean. No sugar. Nothing about love is ever clean. I remember the sound of the train whistle that morning clearer than anything else in my life. Not just because it was loud, but because everything else went silent. The birds, the voices, even the beat of my own heart. Just quiet. Like the world held its breath, waiting on what I'd do next. We were standing on the platform, me, Millie Jo, and Thomas, 3 fools with nothing but a suitcase and a secret. The sun hadn't even come up yet, but the heat was already clingy, like it knew what was coming. Thomas had his harmonica in his shirt pocket, and he kept rolling it between his fingers like he didn't know what to do with his hands. Millie was bouncing on her heels, talking fast about where we'd eat breakfast in New Orleans, how we'd find a little jazz club and dance till our shoes gave out. But I wasn't listening. Not really. I was staring at Mama's house down the road, just barely lit by the dawn. You see, that morning I left a note on the kitchen table, folded neat beside her Bible. Just one line. Don't worry, I'm all right. That's all I had the courage to write. And suddenly, standing on that platform, I wasn't so sure if I'd told the truth. Was I all right? Or was I just running scared? Then it happened. The conductor stepped down, called out the stops like it was any other day. Thomas took my hand, warm, strong, gentle, and said, "You ready?" And Lord have mercy, my knees near gave out. Not from fear, from something deeper. I looked at him, and in that second, I swear to you, I saw the rest of my life. Not just with him, but without everything I'd ever known, without my mama's kitchen, without Millie's laugh echoing down our street, without that dusty little town that made me who I was. Time stopped. I mean it. I didn't hear the train anymore. Didn't feel the sun on my skin. It was like the whole world froze, just for me to decide. And I couldn't move. I turned to Millie. She was already stepping toward the car, looking back like she expected me to follow. And Thomas, sweet Thomas, didn't pull me, didn't push. He just looked, eyes soft, not begging, not pleading, just waiting. And that was the hardest part, 'cause he would have stayed if I'd asked. He would have given it all up. And I couldn't. I let go of his hand, just like that, like unclasping a locket. He didn't say a word, just gave me a long look, the kind that breaks you without a sound, and climbed aboard. Millie stared at me from the steps of the car, her mouth open like she wanted to scream, but didn't. The door closed. The whistle blew. And I stayed. I watched that train pull away till it was nothing but a speck and then nothing at all. And when it was gone, I felt something leave me too. Not just Thomas, not just Millie, but some part of myself I'd never get back. The girl who might have said yes, the one brave enough to leap. I walked home alone, dust in my shoes, tears in my eyes. I swore I wouldn't cry. Mama was waiting on the porch, didn't say a thing, just opened her arms, and I broke, right there, in her lap, like I was 5 years old again. She held me while I sobbed into her apron, and the only thing she said was, "Sometimes love means staying, even when every part of you wants to go." That was the day I learned that not every love story ends with a kiss. Some end on the platform, with your heart in your hands and the whistle fading in the distance. After the train left, there was a quiet I can't rightly describe. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind you want. No, this was the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and makes every little sound feel too loud. The creak of the floorboards, the tick of the clock, the way the wind whispered through the pecan trees, all of it felt like reminders of what didn't happen, what I didn't choose. Millie Jo didn't come back. Not for a long while. She sent a postcard 2 weeks later from a bus station near Baton Rouge. Said she met a saxophone player named Vic who danced like fire and didn't believe in alarm clocks. She said she missed me, but not enough to turn around. And I didn't blame her. I wouldn't have turned around either. Life went on, of course. It always does. Mama never brought up the note. Daddy kept humming his same old tune every time he walked through the door. Folks in town didn't notice much difference in me. I still showed up for work at JCPenney's, still smiled and nodded and sold slips and stockings to the same women who'd known me since I was a baby. But inside, I was quieter. There was a stillness in me that hadn't been there before. I didn't rush anymore, didn't daydream quite as loud. I stopped sitting out by the train yard, 'cause the sound of the whistle made my chest ache in ways I couldn't explain. And every time I passed the pecan tree where me and Millie used to scheme our escape, I'd look the other way. I guess you could say I started living small. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to live big anymore. I'd stood at the edge of something vast, love, maybe, or freedom, or just the chance to be someone new, and I'd said no. And once you say no to a moment like that, it echoes. I started doubting myself more. Second-guessing little things. What to wear, what to say, whether people liked me or were just being polite. I wasn't bitter exactly, just unsure, like maybe I'd missed the version of me that could have become something brighter. There were quiet blessings too. Mornings with Mama on the porch, sharing coffee and gossip. Sunday sermons that felt heavier than they used to. The smell of biscuits baking, the sound of Daddy's boots on gravel. Life didn't stop being sweet, it just lost some of its sparkle. Like the shine had worn off the edges. I stopped writing in my journal for a while. Didn't see the point. Words felt too small, too simple for what I was carrying. And even when I thought of Thomas, which I did more than I'd admit, it wasn't the kiss I missed. It was the look he gave me when he said, "You ever feel like you're meant to be somewhere else?" That question haunted me for years. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. And yet, I didn't break. I bent, sure. I bent real far. But I kept going, kept breathing, kept smiling when folks looked my way. And every now and then, when I heard a harmonica in a movie, or a boy on a street corner humming a tune, I'd feel that old thump in my chest, soft and tired, but still there. I wasn't the same girl after that summer. She stayed on that platform, staring after a train that wouldn't stop. I buried her quiet. No ceremony. just folded her dreams up neat and packed them away. But sometimes, when the wind's just right, I still hear her whispering, maybe next time. It was a Wednesday. Funny how I remember that, of all things. Not a holiday, not a birthday, just a plain old Wednesday. I was 24 then, still in that same town, still at J.C. Penney's, now helping with the new displays by the front window. I'd gotten real good at arranging things just right, making mannequins look like they had somewhere to be. I wasn't thinking about trains anymore. Not often, anyway. That summer felt like a chapter I'd closed and slipped onto a high shelf. But life, well, life has a funny way of dusting off what you thought you'd buried for good. That morning, a lady came into the store, older than me, wearing a blue coat too heavy for spring and pushing a stroller with a baby that wouldn't stop fussing. I smiled at her, out of habit, but she looked about 2 seconds from crying. I asked if she needed help, and she just shook her head and said, "I'm sorry. I haven't slept in 3 nights." Something in her voice pulled at me. That quiet desperation, the kind you only hear when someone's hanging on by a thread. And before I knew what I was doing, I walked around the counter and reached for the baby. "May I?" I asked. She hesitated, but then nodded, and I held that little one right there in the middle of the hosiery aisle. I bounced and hummed, slow and low, just like Mama used to when I was little. And wouldn't you know it, that baby settled down like he'd been waiting for a tune. The woman just stared, her lip trembling. She said, "Thank you. I didn't think I could make it through today." And right then, something moved in me. A warmth I hadn't felt in years, not since before that train pulled away. It wasn't big or loud. It didn't come with music or a kiss or a spark. It came soft, like sun through lace curtains. I realized I could still be a reason someone got through their day. Even if it wasn't the life I imagined at 19, maybe it was still worth living fully. That night, I sat on my bed with my journal, the same one I'd tucked away like a secret, and I wrote one sentence. Maybe I'm not done. After that, little things started changing. I began helping out at the church pantry on Saturdays. Joined a book circle, even if I mostly just listened. I started wearing my hair different, not 'cause anyone told me to, but 'cause I wanted to see who I was now. I smiled more, not the polite kind, but the kind that comes from deep in your chest when you've remembered how to feel. And one Sunday, a man named Walter James brought me a jar of homemade peach preserves after service. Said he liked how I always sang the loudest during the hymns. I laughed and told him that's only 'cause I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But you know what? I took those preserves home. And I ate every spoonful. Now I'm not saying that day in the store fixed everything. It didn't. I still had lonely nights. Still missed Millie's fire and Thomas's harmonica more than I cared to admit. But something opened that day, just a crack. Enough light to remember I still had time. Still had pieces of myself worth off-airing. And isn't that something? After all the hurt, all the quiet, all the maybes and what-ifs, it took a crying baby and a stranger's tired eyes to show me I still had a little shine left. Not the kind that comes from running, but the kind that comes from staying, growing, trying again. It took me years to stop seeing that train when I closed my eyes. The screech of the wheels, the puff of smoke, the way Thomas stood there with that soft, steady look like he was memorizing my face, it followed me through birthdays, holidays, whole decades of quiet, half-lived days. I carried it all, not just the goodbye, but the guilt, the what-ifs, the maybe I should haves. I wore them like pearls no one else could see. And for the longest time, I thought that was the price of saying no when the world offered you yes. But life has a way of nudging you, even when you ain't looking. One summer, years after I'd married Walter James and we'd raised two good kids with strong backs and soft hearts, I found myself clearing out the attic. He'd passed by then, kind and slow to anger, God rest his soul, and the house was too quiet without his whistle in the kitchen. I was sorting boxes, nothing fancy, just old receipts and quilts and church programs, when I found it. That picture. It was folded in a Bible I hadn't opened since before the kids were born. Still sharp round the edges, though time had taken the color from it. Thomas sitting on a station bench, looking away from the camera. And on the back, in his scratchy handwriting, maybe our train will come again. I held that photo in my hand for the longest time, my fingers trembling, not from age, from memory. And right there in that attic, I did something I hadn't done in 60 years. I cried, not the kind of tears that come from sadness. No, these were the kind that wash things away, that make space. I cried for the girl I was, for the boy with the harmonica, for Millie, wherever she landed, for the mother I never got to thank properly. I cried until my shoulders let go of the weight they'd carried so long I'd forgotten they were heavy. And then I let it go. I walked down the stairs, still holding the photo, and I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the table, and without thinking, I reached for the trash bin. But I didn't drop it in. Instead, I stood, walked out to the porch, and held it to the wind. Let the breeze tug at it, lift it, almost take it, but not quite. Then, gently, I tucked it in the crock between the floorboards. Let it rest. Let it be part of the house that had seen my whole life. Not as a wound, but as a thread. That was the day I chose not to regret. Not because the pain was gone, it never fully goes, but because I finally understood, love doesn't disappear just because it didn't last. It still shaped me, softened me, taught me how to see the ache in other people's eyes and not look away. It made me a better woman, a fuller one. I stopped to scan what if and started saying, even so, I lived. Even so, I laughed. Even so, I loved. You see, baby, we don't always get to pick how our story goes, but we do get to decide what kind of person we become because of it. And me? I chose to keep walking. I've been thinking a lot lately about time, how it slips through your fingers like that fine sand at the riverbank. When you're young, you believe it's endless, like the sky itself, like you got all the hours in the world to chase your dreams, or mend your heart, or find what you're looking for. But as the years pile up, and Lord, do they pile, you start to see things a little clearer. Back then, I thought love was supposed to last forever, that if it was real, it would be easy, steady, and sure. But life, well, life showed me a different story. Sometimes love is brief. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's a train you watch pull away while you're still standing on the platform. And it hurts. Oh, how it hurts. But here's the thing I've learned. That kind of love still counts. It counts because it teaches you how to be brave, how to open your heart again, even when you're scared, how to let someone in, knowing full well you might have to say goodbye. It teaches you what's worth holding on to and what you might have to let go. I used to think running away was the only way to find freedom. That leaving behind the dusty streets and the familiar faces would set me free. But freedom, I've found, isn't always about where you go. Sometimes it's about how you carry your story, how you make peace with the roads you didn't take, the loves you lost, the chances you didn't take. And maybe, just maybe, it's about knowing when to stop waiting for a sign, a train, a second chance that might never come. Sometimes the greatest courage is in settling in your own skin, in finding the beauty in what is instead of what could have been. So, if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, like you're holding your breath for something to change, something to save you, I'll tell you what I'd say. Don't wait. Not for a train, not for a person, not for a perfect moment. Start now. Start where you are, with what you've got, with the pieces of your heart you've kept safe. Because life is too short for regrets, too precious for hesitation. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. You are enough. Right now. Right here. And love, in all its forms, will find you when you stop chasing and start living. So go ahead, child. Step off that platform. Take a breath. And walk your own road. You might be surprised where it takes you. Without shame. Without apology. Just forward. Well, now here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with y'all. I hope you felt a bit of what I felt those long ago days. The ache, the hope, the sweet sting of a moment that never quite leaves you. It's funny, isn't it? How some memories stay alive, tucked deep inside, like little fires that never fully burn out. You know, I often wonder, do you believe that true love has a way of coming back? Not necessarily the same way you lost it, or the same place, or the same faces. But somehow, in the quiet corners of your life, in the gentle turns of your heart, in the unexpected moments when you least expect it. Maybe it's a look in a stranger's eye. Maybe it's a song on the radio that makes you catch your breath. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the memory of a train whistle in the night, calling you home to a time when everything was new and fragile and full of possibility. I tell you, this story I shared ain't just about me, or Thomas, or Millie Jo. It's about all of us. The dreams we chase, the risks we take, the loves we hold on to, even if only for a moment. It's about the times we stand on the edge, wondering if we should step forward or turn back. And the times we make our choice, whatever it may be. And what I hope you'll take away from this, if nothing else, is that love, in all its messy, beautiful forms, shapes who we are. It teaches us courage. It shows us the depth of our own hearts. And sometimes it leaves us with questions more than answers, like whether the train will ever come back for us. I like to think it might. Sometimes, when the wind's just right and the night is quiet, I swear I can still hear that whistle. And I wonder if somewhere, maybe Thomas is listening too, remembering the girl who let him go. So now, my dear friends, I want to ask you, right here, right now, do you believe true love is something that finds its way back to us? And if you do, what would you do if it came back to your doorstep? I won't pretend I have all the answers, but I do know this. Life is too short to hold on to regret, too precious to be afraid of love's wild, winding road. And no matter what your story looks like, it's worth telling, worth living, worth holding close. Thank you for listening to mine. And if you ever hear that distant train whistle, maybe you'll think of me. Maybe you'll smile. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready to catch the next one.